This is my review for the 1983 film Blue Thunder. Now, what's amazing about this particular movie is it was originally intended to be a cautionary tale about what would happen if we ever militarized the police force. And the sad reality is we live in this future. If you've watched like the SWAT TV show or anything else, you can tell. I mean, they drive around in tanks now, and they've got all this military armament, and so the thing that they were worried about back in 1983 is the future we live in today. And when it comes to the spying and the surveillance that this helicopter did, it's lightweight compared to what the government does to us every day, especially when it comes to like homeland security and stuff. So this cautionary tale ended up being very prophetic, because we basically live in this world now that they were warning us about back in 1983. Now, this is a wild type of movie. They would never be able to make something like this nowadays, just because of all the litigation and safety standards that they would implement for an action film like this. For example, they're hovering like 50 feet above Los Angeles in a lot of the action sequences with the helicopters. You know, they have a dogfight above bystanders, and you know, there's no way this film would be made today with the helicopters that close to, you know, civilians. There's just no way. And you have to understand too, this film was filmed in 1981. It was a few years before that terrible helicopter incident on the accident on the Twilight Zone movie, where two children and actor, I think Vic Morrow, they were decapitated because a helicopter got too close to them, hovering. So this film wouldn't have been able to be made just a few years later, because I think that they made that Twilight Zone movie in 83 or 84. So it was only like 2 or 3 years after this one was filmed. Now, a lot of people will say, oh, Blue Thunder, that was a Airwolf knockoff. That's one of the knocks that a lot of people say about this film and the TV series. But I hate to break it to you, Blue Thunder, both the film and the TV series were filmed before Airwolf ever aired. So Blue Thunder was the original, and Airwolf was the knockoff, the clone. So we need to put that one to bed finally, because, you know, the whole Blue Thunder TV show was pretty much shot before the very first episode of Airwolf aired. And this movie was shot like 3 years before they filmed the very first episode of Airwolf. So it's not even, you know, it's not even a real issue. Airwolf came way later than Blue Thunder, so we're gonna put that one to bed. Now, it's kind of an interesting film because this is one of the very first films that depicted PTSD that I've ever seen, at least from my point of view. I don't think any other films really touched on like a Vietnam veteran suffering from PTSD, and I don't think they had the term PTSD yet. You know, they were just called people shell-shocked back then and stuff, and that's about as good as it got. Roy Scheider does an amazing job as the leading man in this, and it's a funny story behind that, him jumping on board Blue Thunder, because he just didn't want to do any more Jaws sequels. He tried to find the very first film to get out of making like a third Jaws movie. But he does a great job in this film. He's playing someone who's kind of, you know, unstable, suffering from PTSD. Yet, because it's like Roy Scheider, even though he does some questionable things, he's still so likable as an actor, and he's got that charisma that you can't help but, you know, be on his side by the end of the film, even though he's playing an anti-hero. He's not supposed to be like, you know, like a traditional type of, you know, hero. And he does some screwed up stuff, you know, like, you know, one of the things he had a problem with in the script was shooting down those fighter jets above Los Angeles. You know, he had a big problem with that because he felt that a police officer would be sworn to protect civilians, and he would fly his helicopter out over the ocean and stuff and wouldn't risk, you know, civilian lives. But he got overruled on that one, and they put it in the film. When it comes to the action sequences in this film, it's one of the, I mean, I think it is one of the best films produced in the 80s, especially when it comes to aerial footage. You know, a lot of films like Top Gun and Iron Eagle is especially egregious. They used a ton of model shots, but the director John Badham, he actually did most of the action sequences with practical effects. You know, there's only one or two shots of like a remote control helicopter where they couldn't use a real helicopter. For example, when they do the loop, you know, because they added so much weight building the Blue Thunder helicopter, it was incapable of doing a loop-to-loop, even though the original Gazelle, I believe, can do it. So don't quote me on that. I'm not an airplane expert, so I don't know if that's true. I know some fast helicopters can do loops. I don't know if the Gazelle is one of them, but you know, I believe it is. This is such an interesting film too, because, you know, for the longest time I didn't realize Daniel Stern was Lyman Good. I don't know, for some reason, you know, when I think of Daniel Stern, I think of like City Slickers and like Home Alone and all that other stuff. For the longest time I didn't realize he was Wonder Love, so it's kind of funny to you know, realize that that's a very, very young Daniel Stern in this movie. And you know, it took me like 2 or 3 times to put it together, because I'm also not used to seeing him, you know, clean shaven. You know, I'm so used to seeing him as the wet bandit and you know, Home Alone. So I will also point out that this movie has one of the absolute coolest villains of all time. Malcolm McDowell is such a jerk. He's just a joy to watch as that slimy, you know, bad guy. And he was absolutely terrified of flying in the helicopters, but after he saw, you know, Roy Scheider go up in the helicopters, he decided that he had to do it. And you know what's funny too is he was absolutely just completely afraid to go up. He was afraid of heights and all kinds of stuff. And he actually negotiated in his contract that they were going to do all process shots with him, you know, like with you know, a projected background when he was in the helicopter, and it was all going to be studio shots. But like I said, when he saw Roy Scheider doing all the stuff in real life, in real helicopters, he decided to go up. And all those grimaces where he's trying to look like a badass are just sheer terror. And it's just fun watching him. It's probably one of his best film performances too. I know Malcolm McDowell isn't a fan of being in like Star Trek Generations, and he said some colorful things about being in the Star Trek movie, but I think he's great in Star Trek Generations, and I absolutely loved him in Blue Thunder. I think Blue Thunder is probably one of his best performances, you know, short of being in one of the Kubrick movies, but nonetheless, just an absolute dynamite film. You can probably tell that I absolutely love Blue Thunder. I already did a video on the TV show, you know, picking my five favorite episodes from the first season. You know, Blue Thunder was, you know, just one of those iconic things when I was a kid. Everybody in my block in the neighborhood actually had the big plastic Blue Thunder helicopter with action figures. So I was the only one on the street that didn't own one. Like, you know, I knew like 3 other kids that were on the same street, and they all were showing off their Blue Thunder helicopters when I didn't have one. So I was kind of jealous of them having that cool little toy. Although I had the Knight Rider toy at the same time, so I felt like it balanced it out okay. Because, you know, the 80s were all about like those super vehicles, you know, Knight Rider, Street Hawk, Airwolf, Blue Thunder, even the Highwayman had the super vehicles. I mean, just so many shows with these high-tech vehicles, and some of them were even characters in the show. And it just, it was an era that I'm very fond of, and I always pop in Blue Thunder when I'm feeling nostalgic for revisiting the early 1980s. So if that's what you're looking for, if you're looking for like a blast from the past, then I highly recommend checking out the Blue Thunder movie. And, it's one of the movies from the early 80s that I think holds up pretty well.